Good evening. This is the March 11th meeting of the Master Plan Implementation Committee. I'll call the meeting to order at 7:03. Public comment. Hearing none. Moving on. Review and approve summary of February 11th, 2019 meeting.
Minutes.
Minutes.
Everybody get them?
Yes.
I did. I do not think I was in attendance of that meeting.
You were
So I
not.
will
You were not.
stay.
You were. It was just, you were the only absent individual. Yeah.
It's a good conversation. And I appreciate you getting those to us in advance and how thorough you are. You win the minutes prize.
Any comments or corrections?
No, I don't think there was anything that I saw. We had a couple of assignments people were going to follow up on, but I don't know if that necessarily needs to be in the minutes.
Oh, well, I inserted them.
Oh, did you? Okay, maybe I'm...
That's what,
You did a
I
corrected
tried
version
to
at some
do
point.
that, yeah.
So I do not have an update for my stuff. I sent Randall a nice long message and apparently he didn't get it. So we went to round two, but I'm sure he will get back to me.
The follow-ups that came up
Yeah.
should be inserted under each of the bullet points.
Okay.
Unless you see something missing.
Nope, I might have missed it. That's fine. Make a motion.
Route 10 is a state road. Oh, I'm
What
sorry.
did you say?
Route 10.
People wondered, is state road, is Route 10 a state road?
No, we were wondering about financial aid available for roads and what, there's 17 miles. And so we're wondering what in addition, I think,
Okay,
to,
that's
right? Is that what it was?
In addition to the certain roads that were, considered under,
Right, available
believe,
federally.
available funds,
So
but
that was one of
it
the
was clearly
questions
more
that
than what route
that
10
I asked Randall is, which other roads might we be?
I think
we
that
figured it was
is,
probably county.
what, Route 10?
No, like Route 10, it was probably Route 10 and county.
And so that's a typo. First section roadways, I said, second sentence, people wondered, is state roads where Route 10? And it should be if state roads where Route 10 or where. That's what it should say, I think. So typo there.
And then in the second line under roadways, it's whether they are, rather than than
Yeah,
are.
you're right.
Oh, they actually, okay, see, wait, keep looking, you'll find it. Days spelled with a T to be behind.
So sidewalks accessibility wise, they have to be built to sort of mixed use standards. So they're wider than your normal 3-foot sidewalk. Some are 5 feet, some are 6 feet, depending on the area. So by mixed use, it's not only like a powered wheelchair, it's even sometimes larger things, to be honest. So they go 5 or 6 feet, yeah.
And it was supposed to be that
Two wheelchairs.
two wheelchairs
Can pass.
going in opposite directions should be able to pass at the same point.
Because that's what the standard they're building, the ones up by Cumbies. I mean, the truck was driving on the other day.
That may not be good for them.
So do you want to make any changes on the minutes before we go on to?
I did not get to Ed Gibson about the connection, and I will, between PVTA and FRITA.
So with those little corrections, putting the move to,
I move to approve the minutes for the February 11th meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Approved. All right, continue review of master plan, chapter 5, mobility.
Oh, we're on chapter 6. I think we finished.
Did we finish that?
This was
So I
all-
posted that.
Yes.
So that's been complete.
Except for our follow-up things, yes.
Yeah, I think one thing we we found that there were appendices that some of us had, some of us didn't in the report. And so there were some things there that had some charts and walking trails and stuff that we hadn't really focused on at one point in time. So we were learning as we went along in that meeting too. Or stuff that we hadn't seen before. But then there were some follow-up questions.
All right, so,
And just to let you know,
Yes.
if this is appropriate or not, I did,
Everything's appropriate.
and I'll just talk about this section. I did follow up with the Council on Aging on the goals that they were written into. Obviously, this has been sitting for a long time, so their board members now was unknown to them about this whole process of being involved with other committees on certain goals in the master plan. So we did, and we talked about the one, pursue opportunities to, to expand public transportation in Southampton, and they are very interested. We're going to try to get a little feedback from the members themselves, the seniors themselves, but it sounded like it was something that people would really appreciate, the ability to have more mobility, less dependent on others, less dependent on the FRITA, being able to go in and on their own go into town, either direction, Westfield or Northampton. So we're going to talk more with them, and then I'll report on the findings on the other things, because we covered all the goals that were here for them.
And so I have a couple things on that too. So I had a conversation with the principal at Hampshire Regional, Kristen, about, would it be possible for us to use the van that they're not using all the time when they're transferring students? The short answer is maybe. The long answer is that they couldn't commit to a schedule because of the fact that state law requires the school to provide transportation to kids who have been placed in foster care or in other, places, and that means sometimes our vans and our buses are driving all the way to Worcester or Greenfield or something. So if we got an out-of-district placement that required that, that would take priority.
Right.
And then the other thing is, would it have to be shared with all the towns? Her feeling is that if we developed our own little transportation system, we would make a killing with the local schools and providing van transportation for students. We would save a lot of money ourselves, and that we would rent it out.
Because the transportation is more than the tuition.
Correct.
I came up with the student that wanted what lives in Westfield, right over the border.
Right.
And that was a topic of discussion by the select board was, should we just buy a van? Like, but then you get into licensing and all those other things, and at that point it was specifically for one student, so was it really worth it? But like you said, if it's a
And we're getting
larger
more
scale.
students, right? Norris has students, and right now they're paying for the Hampshire Regional van, and
So what you're saying is it would be the school to get a fleet of vans and rent it out to the town, or the town to get a fleet of vans and rent it
I
out
don't
to the
know.
school?
I don't know how that would work. I mean, none of us have any money, so that is an issue, but it is something to think of for down the road. If particularly if seniors needed transportation and we could get some grant funding for that kind of thing, there might be some synergies that we could get
Well, the
between our older population and our younger population, which I think would be beautiful.
The transportation they have now through Franklin Regional Transit Authority is a grant through the state, and it just provides transportation 4 days a week. But here the issue is there's one vehicle, and
Gone over
there are
funding.
priorities, who books it, medical appointments before any entertainment things. I mean,
Right.
all of those things, and it's just not sufficient to meet people's needs when there are conflicting appointments.
My feeling is the senior center, with the exception of medical appointments, could probably work around the school schedule, which is early in the morning and later in the afternoon. So, but I think the medical appointments would be the one that would be the sticking point.
Yeah.
All right, Chapter 6, Public Services and Facilities. Covered a lot, covered the major public services and facilities, right? Water, sewer, infrastructure. And start from the top. I know water itself has always been a big topic of discussion, separate source, alternative feeds. So the water department does have a master plan, which does actually cover a decent amount of these, not necessarily in any particular order, but they do talk about supply redundancy, how do we regain full capacity at wells. It talks about interconnections with neighboring towns. It talks about additional water storage tanks. So when we go into the sort of priority and goal review, a lot of those can be answered through this plan. Now, is there we have a master plan to address goals on the master plan. So, you know, these could be 5 years, 10 years off. They could be farther off, but it's on their radar. They are looking at a lot of the needs and the items that come up.
Apropos specifically to the water issues, a couple of meetings ago, the question came up about whether there, and I think it was in chapter 4, Water Supply Protection District. Remember Christina looked for it? Well, I happened to be reviewing the zoning bylaws the other night.
Yeah.
Because I feel like they need to get into my brain a little more than they are, and I found it. It's at the end of the zoning bylaws, the Southampton Water Supply Protection District, which I assume was accepted by the town. It's listed as Article 25 to amend them, and it's on the website, so I assume that it was just sort of cut and pasted into the website from the town meeting. It doesn't include a map. It includes discussion of the definition, the watershed, the scope of authority. You guys can read it for sure.
It doesn't say like what area it covers?
It sort of does. It is established to include all lands within the town of Southampton lying within the primary recharge areas, groundwater, aquifers, and watershed area of the Mandan Reservoir, which now or may in the future provide public water supply. And there, it references a map entitled Water Supply Protection District. It's on file with the town clerk according to this. It's not in the zoning bylaws, unless it's in the master plan. Did we have a map called Water Supply Protection District?
I was just flipping through.
It refers on page 108, now mine being an original copy, and I don't even think it's a final draft. It says, in the last full paragraph, it says, see figure 8.7. I don't have figure 8.7. Does anyone?
Coming up at all?
6.
Well, it would be,
That's table. I don't know what figure.
It must be in chapter 8.
Yeah,
8.
I don't see.
I'm gonna zoom ahead.
Well, yeah, this is what they have. I mean, it's an aerial view.
Yes,
That's it.
I get it. Yep.
It's on page 168.
Yes.
160,
That tells me
Zoning district?
absolutely nothing.
Right.
That's
160
There's
what?
nothing there.
168. Yeah, that.
Planning, that's not, I got the wrong page.
It says figure 8.7.
Which one are you at?
The colorful one.
Oh, where's it?
Oh.
Where is that now?
This is 162 on the...
Figure
So
figure
this
8.7.
Oh,
number-
you're planning for, well,
62.
this just said, on this,
There you go.
book, it
this
says
the same?
Rockville.
The zoning
That's-
district.
No, that's,
Thank you.
no, that's
Yeah.
not right. But that's what I have is
Oh,
8.7.
they,
Oh, I have
messed up
another
there.
Looks like there's two figure
Yeah, I
8.7.
have two as well, and 286.
Yeah, so that's the Rockville district, so I've got to.
So there are 2 8.7s.
286
Yes.
is that way.
Right, that doesn't make sense.
They skipped
Oh, there
2
you go.
and 3 or something.
So Water Supply Protection Overlay District.
And what page is the overlay district on?
162.
162.
Thank you.
It's really tough to see.
Right, which
what.
parts are what?
So it looks like,
The light.
so the Water Supply Protection Overlay District is diagonal from
Straight.
left to right. So it looks like
I hardly see
kind of
it's
these
right in this.
areas.
Right in
Yeah,
here.
it's all this.
But there's
It's also overlapping the yellows.
Overlaps, like this whole way.
Yeah, so it breaks it down by
It looks like
sort
it's
of
all
parcel
this
code,
too.
commercial,
Like all
industrial,
this light.
residential, and then it gives you the overlay,
But
which,
there is
Yeah,
some
no, you're
that-
right. Yeah.
so basically the light
with the
purple
floodplain, too.
over the yellow
It's
is
really
the
right
water
around the
supply
rivers and
protection
stuff.
overlay district.
Can you point to where?
Yep, so here to the, there.
Oh, over the, oh, I thought you said over the yellow.
Yeah, so over the yellow, over some of the red.
Oh, okay.
So it
It's a pretty
breaks it
good
down by
amount.
It's a
zoning,
lot of it.
and then it
51%.
overlays the zoning, so it's kind of, it goes up here, and then this big.
It's almost just
That's
like an
a-
extended range off of like water sources.
Right.
So the purpose of the district,
Not to make it more confusing, but it's also the floodplain overlay district, I'm assuming is part of that area as well, so.
Well, that's the, where it's like darker right around
Yeah, so like right
the
here,
streams
yeah,
and stuff. Yeah.
floodplain, floodplain.
Which would make sense, yes.
so
Trying to get over
the
this.
restrictions,
Dark black lines.
Yeah, yep. And then East Street, so we're right here, actually right at Southampton.
Most of that is in the
on this
the which is the next chapter we're
Yes, 51% of the town.
Not in color though.
right. It's a good amount
Yeah.
I know, it was just a.
Right.
for a map. Purchase.
But mine does not define, I don't see any yellow. You know, I don't see
Yeah.
any distinction between this hatched area.
Yeah, if you look at on page 109, they have a figure of the pond's aquifer boundaries, and that's pretty much like within. It covers a lot of the same
So
area.
this is, yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
it's all kind of the same. It just includes this too. The other aquifer areas are in that district.
So, well, there we go.
And I'm 108.
so
So
what
it's
you
a
might
better
want to do
contrast here.
is go to the zoning bylaws at some point in the future and read what apparently had been approved by the town on usage such as salt storage, fertilizers,
What did it say?
several pages. You want-
Is there like a no salt storage or yes salt storage?
Well,
No
let's see here,
fertilizer, yes
restricted
fertilizer?
uses. Okay, so prohibited uses, business and industrial uses, not agricultural, which manufacture, use, process, store, or dispose of hazardous materials or waste as a principal activity is prohibited, including but not limited to metal plating, chemical manufacturing, wood preserving, furniture stripping, etc. I don't know that I'm going to read it all.
So that's
Okay.
prohibited in those areas?
That's what it says, if I'm reading it
Well, I was gonna
right.
say-
Well, that's not a very welcoming, commercially welcoming community.
Well, it's not saying that we can't do it, we just can't do it over our water supply protection district.
It's like more than half the town, through the center of the
Consideration.
commercial
It
areas in the
is
town.
Well, yeah, that's the only commercial zone.
What year was that?
I don't know, it's not dated in the way I printed it out. It just came as part of the zoning bylaws. I'm sorry,
No, that's, I mean,
I can't
it's,
say what year it was approved. Sorry.
That's a good
I'm a little
find.
frustrated by the way they're online, and it goes on from their restricted uses, and then you have to measure for the drinking water standards.
Manure storage.
Well, if you actually look at that map with the district on it, you can see where Route 10 comes into town from Westfield. We have a dedicated industrial park area. That's not within the district.
Which
So
page are you talking?
back to 162. So
Okay.
Right.
basically, the places that we have identified that where we could potentially put commercial things, it would be okay.
It would be okay. So it's not that, it isn't the entire town, at least if, that's, I peered at it too.
It covers most of Route 10, but on the Westfield end of things, it would be okay.
Yeah.
It does refer to 51% of town being
Oh, it's-
within the.
yeah, it's a good amount.
Yeah.
Is this the zoning bylaws are on?
That's what I go all the way to the bottom of
Yeah.
that page.
2016, it says updated.
Okay, I don't have that one. I've got 12/31/14.
Okay,
So,
let me see.
good. And then I happen to know we have new bylaws because we just approved the marijuana use bylaws.
Water protection codes.
These I got from the town office
Water supply
1 year ago.
protection district.
Do you want to see what it's called? It's called
No matches, it might not be searchable.
I guess I only bring that up because in this
yeah,
chapter,
scroll down
you
that
know,
way.
they talked about
Yeah, okay,
even,
pass it on.
you know, when they put
Sorry.
this master plan together about, they really recognize the need for sewer and public water on
Yes.
the edges of town, especially if we're gonna think about
What's
some
that?
commercial,
What section?
well, that's,
Yeah.
it's a good thing.
No, they're not searchable.
No, they are not searchable.
So with water comes, obviously, the wastewater, which we just mentioned. There was another select board discussion?
Tomorrow night.
Oh, tomorrow night. There was one, yeah, a couple months ago about this and whether it was a feasibility study to bring it farther into town, to bring it from Westfield up or to bring it from Easthampton down. What's,
I'm gonna look exactly what they're talking about, because they have a couple of different water-related topics that we're gonna cover tomorrow night, so don't get just look at that.
Well, I found a couple things interesting because I know they said on Gun Road that there's
Yeah.
public water on Route 10, and then there's public water that comes down the hill to the bottom of the bridge, but it's not from Route 10 down Gun.
Right.
I was like, I don't know why you wouldn't just connect that.
the railroad, right?
It would go under the railroad.
It's very difficult to drill under a railroad.
It's a raised railroad. It's a raised railroad.
Don't matter. And we do installations over and under railroads. It's very costly, very time consuming. We have a railroad permit for an overhead line extension that's been in since November.
Is that because of the footings required for the?
It's just they're sort of their railroads are their own entity. You know, they own the rights there, and they're just not always the easiest to gain rights on their property. It's no different than the bike trail itself, like we talk about. They're not easy to give up those rights.
Yeah, so tomorrow night is going to be a presentation by a professor, I think from UMass,
Smith,
Smith, yeah.
hydrogeologist from Smith.
Bob Newton, and talking about the recharge areas, the importance of the Kanopka Gouache, and property on Pomeroy Meadow. And then there's an executive session on something else, but talking about our drinking water and our supply. And that ties into development and a lot of other issues that we're concerned about, so.
Time's that?
It's 6 o'clock, it's just downstairs.
Is that considered part of a select board meeting, or?
It is the
It is.
select board meeting.
It's a joint with the
It's
Water
a joint
Commission.
with the Water Commission, yes. It's a special meeting. It's not the regular select board meeting. And it will be broadcast for people if you can't make it, which I think is good, and recorded, which I think is important to keep people in the loop.
Good.
That would be a great meeting to just bring up that we may be looking for some statuses on some of their master plan goals. And if you could introduce it to whoever's there as we're also participating on the master plan
Right.
implementation committee. Our plan coincides with your plan. We may be reaching out, and I can do the reach out, but just kind of letting them know we may just
That
be looking
were
for
in the works, and
statuses.
that was what I did with the COA, and I know that's what Chris did with the Greenway, and I guess others of you formally or informally have been talking it with other committees just to get a sense of, are you aware? And if you are, can you give us an update of?
So I will say that at the planning board the other night, Ryan Gallagher, is that how you pronounce his name, who's chair of the zoning bylaws committee, correct? The zoning board, ZB zoning board. He was totally unaware that the master plan was even around, or was certainly not brought out again. I invited him to come tonight. So he might be able to show up. If you're watching, Ryan, we welcome you. The whole idea that that we're raising all these issues again, and it's important to include everybody on these, yeah.
The zoning bylaws are incomplete online, so they only go up to section 11, and there's 7 more sections that are in the table of contents that aren't in the 56 pages online. So 14 is probably
Good catch.
No? Okay.
And it actually cuts off at water supply third.
Funny that. That's why it is.
So, I'm sorry, I have questions too about this BayPAC or the Barnes Aquifer Protection Advisory Committee.
Yeah.
You know, it says that town officials in Southampton are active on the committee. We're having this meeting tomorrow night, and we're talking about, you know, is BayPAC, does it exist, or are they involved, or are towns coming to the meeting, or?
Well, I think they're trying to resurrect that as well. And it was led by the Easthampton mayor. I went to, they had a little luncheon just to kind of reintroduce it and to get people back together. I think Southwick would like to join as well, because everybody's concerned about future water supply. There were no decisions. Our water commission was represented. I'm certainly not the best representative because I don't know anything about the water commission and all this other stuff. So, to my knowledge, they have not had anything since, but I really think we're talking like 6 months ago now. I'll check into it and see where they are. The Water Commission may be able to fill us in tomorrow night a little bit.
That's a good question to ask them.
Yes.
Yeah, 'cause I'm just curious, so who has ultimate authority here within town? The Water Commission or BayPAC, which represents a broader coalition?
Over what?
Over, for example, if there's going to be development on Pomeroy Meadow Road.
It's a zoning bylaw.
You know, so if I'm a member of BayPAC and I'm from Easthampton and I'm concerned about my water supply, and I see over in Southampton, they're not paying attention, for example, to a development or whatnot. Do I have any redress? As a BayPAC member, can I say, whoa, wait a minute? So, you know, my questions are, is there a bylaw for a BayPAC? Who has authority? And do those authorities mesh? Do they even acknowledge one another? Who's policing all this? I don't have a sense that there's...
Good
I
questions.
feel like that's probably one of those things where
I don't think, it doesn't sound like it
would
would
have to be aware
Yeah,
of.
the
Like
Department
if
of
you-
Environmental Protection.
If you read the language here, right, so BayPAC, the compact gave BayPAC authority to review and comment, so not necessarily act, but review and comment on development of regional impact, developments of regional impact in the aquifer recharge area, so let's say a development in the recharge area, as well as the authority to develop and implement. So the authority to develop and implement does not mean they actually developed or implemented anything yet, right? A regional aquifer protection strategy. My thing with it, when I read the language, is it's a bit passive. So it's not necessarily enforcement. Like, you can develop a strategy, but you're not going to go arrest someone for the police department, right? You can tell them how they should do it, but it's an actual enforcement agency. So I don't read it as they have the final say. I think the zoning bylaws, you know, with the purple outlined as heavy as it is with no overlay, I think those are those commercially developable areas, and then, you know, it doesn't sound like there's anyone else other than the town and the...
So they play an advisory role and give a voice to surrounding towns to what's happening in your town, which is similar to how I read it, but then I started asking myself, so, I mean, when someone pulls a building permit, is it the building inspector who's looking at the zoning and looking, or not? How does that... Do
I
we
feel like
have?
we've come across this discussion with other things.
I think we have.
Who's
Yeah.
actually,
Yeah.
Yeah.
or is someone that
I wrote,
should
you
be
know, who's
reviewing this
policing?
knowledgeable enough to know, oh, actually, we shouldn't be doing that there.
So we had A&Rs come up on this Gauche property on Pomeroy and this is to the planning board, twice in the last 3 meetings. One on the, I never know, north or south.
East side,
East side.
15 acres on the
15
east.
east on the east side, and they're A&Rs, and I actually abstained because I said, look, we've got this grant application out, we're waiting to hear what's going on, we're talking about this being an important water recharge district, but the planning board passed it because they said, this is just geometry. This is just planning board saying, you got the right frontage, you got the right depth, that's all there is for them to do. They're saying you can't build there. They're saying your A&R meets qualifications. So it's like the planning board doesn't
They looked at their
Feels-
authority and,
feel that that was what I was, advised. Same thing came up at this recent meeting. 2 more lots came on the west side of the road, right? The ones, and the same thing. They just said these are A&Rs and these are, so it passed again. Doesn't mean they'll be built on. Likely they will, but hopefully not. But they were close to the road, and it's the geometry of the property.
right, so it's about who has authority. And so then,
Or who should.
And
Or we
enforcement.
should.
Right,
Right, and
And
so
with
then
the-
I again question, I can see a lot of people saying, this is my area, and this is my area, and then this issue doesn't get addressed.
I'm not sure that anyone's aware of the water
Well, yeah,
supply
that's-
protection
that's what I'm-
district.
that's what I'm
Because
saying.
when I asked one of the water commissioners, he didn't know. And my understanding is that BayPAC was, and then I also wrote an email to Tom
Quinlan?
Gahn,
Oh.
Gahn.
Yeah.
who's our water superintendent, and he never responded as to what it is. As to BayPAC, it was active, I think, until within the year's time, and then Marla Hank said that the last fall's meeting was not called, and she contacted Patty Gambarini at PVPC, and apparently it had disbanded, and now they're trying
Right.
to
And
piece it back
and this Patty
together.
was there.
I don't think, there's nothing, as of the moment, there is no substitute for BayPAC, is that right? There's no oversight.
Right.
So the only,
Oh.
so the one thing I can see, right, so your zoning bylaws or your zoning areas, your zoning zones, the land that's been zoned commercial, commercial highway, industrial, it aligns with the same zoning area on the overlay, right? So you see purple, the bottom center towards Westfield. So those zones align, so you could build an industrial complex there that makes prohibited material in that bylaw, right? Same thing with the,
So you're talking about down near Valley Road?
yes. Yep. And then it looks,
I think they were well, I don't know this for sure, but my understanding was they were having trouble pumping the water up, that there wasn't enough whatever,
see,
and they would have to install a pumping system.
You mean for drain?
For
For
No,
drainage?
Well, for a well?
water supply.
For a well.
They just don't have sufficient water or pressure or both.
I don't know the technicalities of it, but I heard it was an issue.
Where on Valley Road? Because there was something that came before the planning board on the corner of Valley Road and Route 10. And it's a church that wants to build. And the last I heard, and this was the planning board, is that it had to go for peer review. And they had to get, another engineering company to come in and review their proposal. And it didn't have to do with building a well. It had to do with surface drainage, water, and
Okay.
also the questions about being wetlands at that corner. Do you know where I'm talking about, that corner?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So it's,
And the only commercial.
I haven't
zone we
seen
have
it come
in the
back.
church.
I did miss a couple of meetings, but, what's that?
I said we have, in one of the few commercial zones we have,
Yeah,
there's a church.
is that north of Valley Road?
I-
yes.
So it's
North of
that
Valley Road.
corner lot?
Yes.
Okay. It's
So-
actually not even in the commercial zone.
I was gonna say, that's on the
It's
other
Oh,
side.
isn't?
Yeah, it's on the other side of the road,
Okay.
north of it, yeah.
Well, then that's right, there's
Yeah.
the room.
But-
If we-
Right.
So it looks like some of these they've outlined that aren't in the overlay, but then you look at some of your commercial highways, so Route 10, half of that is over the water supply protection overlay district. Not necessarily saying there's industrial
Right, it also depends what kind of
going
operation.
on there, right? But, yeah. So, but without BayPAC, who is really looking at it? Is it a permitting
sensing
review function?
I agree with your feedback that it's not, we can't really rely on BayPAC. That's just a way for other neighboring towns to have some input, and for Southampton to have some input in some neighboring towns. But I think it's more on us locally, who's policing what, and the properties on Pomeroy get attention because they're very visible. But what about a lot here on this side row that's in the overlay that no one really notices or cares? And is anybody saying, well, wait a minute, this is in the water overlay district, can we build here, and what can we build?
And what can we
I don't
build?
Why
think
can we
so.
build
I
one?
don't think anyone's looking at
Yeah.
that.
And that's pretty shocking to me if that's the
Yes,
case.
I think it is too.
So it's all about the kind of integration of the responsible parties.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I say we don't know, but I mean, maybe the building inspector is.
Oh, I bet he doesn't even know about it.
Probably not.
Well, especially with a lot of changeover and turnover of people in place and offices. You've almost got to revamp and reintroduce people as part of their orientation to their new role on any committee that, hey, folks, you have a master plan that is part of this town, fabric here that we all need to be learning about.
Given that you didn't get a
It's just not-
response from
yeah.
Tom Gahn, unless
Right.
we didn't get the email, he strikes me as a fairly responsive gentleman. Like, did he not know about it? We need to follow up with him. Is he aware?
But this isn't even related to the MPI. I mean, we don't need an MPI if we have zoning and,
That's right.
those are the kind of things that you need to
Exactly.
Yeah.
carry on,
Yeah.
and you need some means of auditing whether the current department head or whoever runs
And
an
if the
area is
bylaws are
compliant.
meeting the needs that we want, it's coming down to me starting to see zoning bylaws are loose, poorly documented, hard to read, hard to find, and we've got a lot of loose ends with those zoning bylaws.
Well, I think also, in addition to that, even if they're tight and solid, who's monitoring?
Who's monitoring them, yeah.
Well, who's responsible to? I mean, who's the person in
But
town
does
or
it
group in
take-
town that's supposed to do that?
Does it take someone to and say, wait a minute, how come
Right.
X is happening? And should somebody be going out and inspecting? Do we have to be sort of self-policing on these things? Oh, we see something happening there. I happen to see that one of my neighbors might be parking something that's not consistent with zoning bylaws.
Maybe, but I think
I think there's going to be some authority figure, some official
Well,
capacity that should be.
It becomes a permitting review, right? So if you're going to build something, we're going to build a shed, a 400 square foot shed, right? That requires a permit. Where are you going to put it on your property? Is it away from your property lines? Is it on top of a stream? Are you going to process petroleum products and store them in barrels next to the recharge area, right? Like that's kind of part of that permitting checklist, permitting
Exactly.
process
It
of
is, yeah.
where is it being built? What is its function? Does it hit any of these criteria that are sort of automatic no's?
And Concom is very much involved with that kind of permitting.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah, but a structure, so, yeah, I guess, we think of it as, or I originally think of it as a manufacturing plant that's going to create 55-gallon barrels of, X's on them of some dangerous substance, but it could be whatever, right? Can you actually build a development and reduce the recharge area in this specific area?
Or put a gas station on top of the aquifer.
Right, exactly. It's one of those, is it being reviewed? Is it listed? Is it something that's on the permitting checklist? You pull a building permit, there's 8 or 10 boxes you need to check off to submit the permit. Is someone checking their own boxes when the permit comes in and making sure it's okay.
Yeah.
Right, is it on, are these things on the checklist?
Right.
That's the bottom line, because I
On the
think if
internal
we start,
checklist.
like, who's policing, you know, like Dr. Seuss, the bee watcher, you know, who's watching, it gets ridiculous. I mean, someone has to be responsible, so we just need to make sure the responsible party includes this, and they, I don't know, I'm hoping they do, maybe it's an assumption.
That's what
on
I
my part,
said
but-
a few meetings ago about us having a super committee. I
Yeah.
mean, how do you get that intersection of responsible parties, each
Right.
in their own area, but coming to a mutually agreeable decision with also enforcement? It's almost like you have to build a little matrix.
But
And maybe that's one of the things we do as a result of this.
So, you know, I became aware of an issue that's come before the select board a couple different times this recent month about an issue about somebody has a building on their property that's perhaps being used as a commercial gym, or at least that's what the suggestion is, and it's very hard for me to figure out where that stands right now. I'm looking at you because you're on the select board, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. That, I mean, it's public, it's been on it was on the videos, but
The
back to
issues
this
that
whole
have
thing.
been.
It's now being put back onto the building inspector. That's the way it looked to me at the most recent meeting. The building inspector is supposed to be checking all that. That's the policing person to be checking on that particular issue.
He's the enforcement officer.
Yes.
He's the enforcement
Yes.
officer, yeah. And it appears quite frustrating to me from the standpoint of the two different parties, the two different groups of parties that are faced with this question.
Who should have actually put their foot down and for what? Like when people are building things, or, you know, who's actually supposed to be like, well,
And if, yeah.
That's also relying on a single person's knowledge, and the Historical Commission found that the building inspector was not aware that there was a demolition delay bylaw. You know, he's just gotten, fairly recently, within the year, gotten his certification, and so my guess is that he still has a lot of learning to do to know all of his responsibilities, and because that's pretty basic knowledge that he slipped up on.
So I would ask the question, when the demolition bylaw became actual, or demolition delay bylaw became actual bylaw, was the information communicated and disseminated to all the groups? And I say this because where I work, things change all the time. And unfortunately, ignorance of the rule is not necessarily always the reason to not follow it. Sometimes you clearly just don't know, and then it comes to a point where, well, you should have known that. I didn't know, nobody didn't communicate. And I ask that just because we run it, like I said, we run it to it at work all the time. A policy changes, nobody tells anyone, and then it's, well, what do you mean you didn't know about the policy? So do we communicate those bylaws in town to affected parties, right? So if a bylaw, if a demolition bylaw changes, right, a communication should be sent to every single person that's on the demolition application, or every town party that's on the demolition application permit, because that includes the building department, the health department, the tax assessor, fire department, probably police department. There's a litany of people that need to sign off for you to demolish a building. Did we notify those people? And not just with this bylaw in general, but any bylaw we change. Do we notify all those parties? Because they might not be at the meeting, they could be sick, they
That's-
could be on vacation.
Well, in this
fine.
particular instance, I think that the building inspector came on after the
Right.
bylaw was voted into place, so.
Right, and so that's going to happen, you have turnover. So is there, in addition to notifying, do you require that these different committees, if they have checklists, like the building inspector, I want to see the copy of your updated checklist that includes this.
Right.
Right,
So then that institutional knowledge gets passed on when the personnel changes.
right.
This is like
I know we're a bit off.
building, yeah, but it's, I mean, we're creating an infrastructure here that doesn't seem,
We can't support the
we're
infrastructure. with
identifying the need for one that currently doesn't seem to exist.
I mean, it seems like a simple thing, you know. Does this building meet the requirements for, you know, the water district? That should be on your checklist of
Right.
something that the building inspector or the water commissioner, whoever,
That
checks
che-
off.
right,
You know,
that
before they
checklist-
sign off and be like, oh, actually, no, it doesn't. Just kidding.
That checklist is long, and it seems like if you're pulling a permit, geez, what a pain. But it covers so many different things, and
Just
things,
pre-fill and make copies.
yeah, things like this still get missed. So the checklist is long for a reason.
Yeah.
And the planning board the other night, the announcement was made, you know, PVPC has been supporting, that's Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, has been supporting the planning board for quite a long time with one particular individual who has retired. And so a new person's going to come on who's quite seasoned, has worked apparently long history of doing this kind of work for other towns. And his announcement to our chairperson, Paul Demond, is he's going to create a permit application that's going to be sort of for everything, like a super permit application, so that it's not going to be one for building a garage and one for marijuana bylaws and one for, you know, a commercial structure, et cetera. It makes a lot of sense.
It does.
It does.
And he apparently has a good experience doing that sort of thing. So maybe that will help. Maybe what we need to make sure is at the end of it is, once it's completed, what is the action plan to follow? Does the building instructors...
Well, and who's ultimately responsible for making sure that the whole document is completed and everything that's
Yeah,
been required has
yeah.
been checked off?
Has it been
That's the other
introduced to
thing.
all applicable parties?
It's just been brought up, this gentleman's name has just been brought up because he's just taken on the role for town of Southampton. I'm sorry to say, I don't even remember what his name is, but, yeah, so it's so new.
Yeah.
But it sounds good to me so far.
Definitely, I would just...
Maybe we should invite him here sometime.
The only question I would have is if we do this, are all parties and committees and commissions and boards that are involved, will they be aware of the process? Because they're all individually voted. They all work for the voter, but they don't work for each other.
Right.
So just making sure they're all on the same page of,
Maybe we can do that when
Yeah.
when the draft comes through. Maybe we can ask that it at least go before all the boards and committees that might apply to
Right.
and get their input.
You know, one of the things, I'm on the bylaws committee, and one of the things we're trying to do is create an organization chart. And looking at the dotted lines between these different departments, and I don't know how,
there's a lot of
it's going to have to be
dotted,
like
not
a,
solid
like a
lines.
four-dimensional kind of document, I mean, to envision how they're all going to connect. But let's see if we
For
can
a town of
see what we can
I
come.
know.
No, let's see what we can come up
That's what I
with,
was just
because
thinking.
yeah, we just create it, but then how do people know about it, and how do they follow it, and how do we make sure that it happens?
Communication's a downfall of so many different things.
You know, we sort of get to this point in our meetings every time where we kind of get frustrated, but I feel very, very positive about this. I feel that I'm feeling more and more oriented to the kinds of issues, granted they're not solved, but I hope you aren't getting frustrated with
I
any
mean, I
of
feel
this.
like we're identifying ways that our town could really streamline
Yeah.
what we do.
Yeah.
Okay, good. With that, I am going to move on, just because we have a couple of things. If we have to continue this for another meeting, that's fine, but I do want to try to get a little more done. So wastewater, sewer, you know, coming from the south, coming from the north, it has been a topic of discussion, a commercial industrial hindrance. It's also expensive. You know, feasibility study-wise, installing the infrastructure, pumping if required, depending on topography, because gravity works in your favor, and then depending where you are, it doesn't work in your favor. So I don't know.
I lost you, where are you?
Page
111.
111. I don't know if the select board's had any more conversations. I was at a meeting, I think it was the meeting when I did the overview for this, they had talked about sewer feasibility, and it just sort of
Trailed off.
yeah, it was just kind of like an informational conversation, but there were no takeaways, so I don't think anything's necessarily happened with this. But it's a hindrance, but it's a lot of money, and it's the chicken or the egg. Do you build it? and hope they come? Or do you try to entice them to build and then we'll build it?
Or if we could get them to come, whomever it is, couldn't there be some sort of benefit to develop their own wastewater?
Right.
I mean, isn't there a section in here that talks about wastewater of commercial properties on the Easthampton side? They built their own. I mean, what is Big Y's wastewater?
They're all hooked into Easthampton, and the ones way down
Sewer
are
goes
hooked
up to
into...
the car wash.
So you have to hope the next building
Yeah.
is south of the car wash. You have to hope the next building is south of that,
Yeah.
to continue the line, just to have the developer
Yeah, right.
foot the cost.
Right.
Because if he wants to build,
Well, we heard that
At the bowling
Amazon's
alley,
not
he's
going
kind of out of
into
luck.
New York City. Do you think we can? Amazon because can't build any houses here. Right.
I mean, it's a great thing, it's good to have, but how do you get it there? With what function? I mean, realistically, is grant funding available for something that, we can talk about it conversationally as a demand, but there isn't actually a demand,
Right.
right? Everyone has septic where they're on, well, the commercial ends are on the sewer, but there isn't an actual demand. There's a hopeful demand of someone wanting to go in the future, but
You're right, it's definitely chicken and egg. If you build it, will they come? But
It's been voted down several times in Southampton. It has been voted on.
Oh, has it?
In the past,
Did
yeah.
it say that in
I
there?
think it's in there. Yeah.
voted down to spend money to build it?
Yeah, to put in sewer through the center of town, because all of these structures have insufficient septic systems.
Yeah, I know the north end of High Street is the same thing. It's just all on ledge up there, and it's just, they're non-compliant. They want to sell their house.
Right. And it's always been voted down, and it's been more than once that
And
we
is
voted on.
that where the rationale is about changing the rural character, or they just didn't want to spend the money?
I think it's a little too costly.
Yeah, because
I would think it'd be money, right? 'Cause
I would think money would be
Yeah, maybe.
if you go down Route 10, it's only a couple handfuls of residents, but we all pay for it,
Right.
Right.
And then, from a resident standpoint, you're then hooked up, you pay a sewer fee,
Yeah.
and that kind of, maybe that deters someone. If you don't have a failed system, right? Like if you're not looking to sell and you don't have a failed system, well, I don't necessarily need
Right.
sewer.
You'd really have to try to sell the benefits of potential commercial development and really hope it comes in and do the cost benefit. And that's hard to imagine.
Right.
But then that's a bigger issue in terms of changing the character of the town. You know,
I mean,
and you have opposing, I
right,
mean,
but
you want
I,
some of both, but
my sense is that people are less concerned with the character of their town along College Highway than the other parts of town. I don't know if that's true,
But even think of where it is on College Highway. It's the farthest you can get from town. Like from the actual center of town.
Right.
Like if you had to characterize Southampton, if you took out the northern end, so if you took out Big Y and down by Valley Road, like there's
nothing there.
Nothing. And there's, is it Marmon Keystone?
Urban Keystone.
But you wouldn't even know that's there if you didn't drive down Clark Street. You have no idea. And then you drive down, you're like, what is this building doing?
Well,
Yeah.
there's a commercial area where JP's restaurant is.
Right.
That, there's a very small commercial area there. Party World or Party, whatever it's called.
But it's residential looking. Even
Does, yeah.
the party whatever
Party Patrol.
is a house. The insurance agency, bicycle store is kind of Cape Cod-ish looking. JP's isn't a standout type building, so it falls into a rural town center. So you don't even think it's commercial development. And that was the point of it, right? When you design structures like that, so they fit in versus stand out.
There was a person, a developer came before the planning board at the recent meeting, talking about asking for a zoning change in the horse field right next to JP's, historical
property.
district,
Yeah.
to build a Dunkin' Donut.
To build what?
A Dunkin' Donuts.
Right
because
down
that
the street
property's
from the
been
other
for sale
Dunkin'
for a while,
It
but it's
has, but it's not
residential.
zoned. It has to
Residential.
require, it would require zoning change.
And the owners saw a
differential,
change, saw the change, and they withdrew it.
And they withdrew it, and Bob Kozub, who's in a butter and is very involved with the Historical Commission, was present, and this is, of course, all public knowledge because it was a public meeting, and, pointed out this was historical, and it's right across the street from a very historical cemetery. We reviewed that in here, and so it was just a discussion. It wasn't, there weren't plans presented, they were just general discussing, and of course, it would have to go before the town for a zoning bylaw change.
Why on earth do we need 2 Dunkin'?
Well, I asked that question, and the answer was the current Dunkin' Donut, just, 200 feet down the road, is not in a building that's owned by
Right.
the company that owns the Dunkin' Donut.
So they're doing that in different areas. They just
Yes.
did that in Hadley. They've been doing it all over.
Williamsburg
So does
was,
that
Williamsburg.
franchisee
Yeah,
want to
Haydenville
move
area,
to
yeah.
a
It
standalone
would.
location?
and own their
Yeah.
own building, and probably have not a real strip mall, but perhaps a small
Well,
bank.
look at the one down on
One other.
202,
Yeah,
Yeah, they,
that corner of County
Split.
Road and
yes.
202.
Yeah, there's one there. Yeah.
And it has a couple of other small
Yeah.
That would be,
businesses
that
in it.
it seems to be their business plan going
it's a
in that
rental,
direction.
rental income for another.
Makes sense. Makes sense for them.
It does.
Doesn't make sense
So,
for our historical district.
It was just discussed, that's all. So somebody told me, oh, I heard it's going to happen, but strictly discussion.
Wow.
I'm just curious, does the topography have anything to do with this? Is this sewer that's presently in place like at Big Y, is that gravity fed or is there a pump? 'Cause I'm thinking of the road.
That's what I'm thinking
As it
of.
comes through and goes over the Manhan, and how's that gonna work?
I mean, what do you mean to bring it like through here? Or, I mean, yeah, you'd need a pumping station somewhere. I don't know
So,
the
I don't know if that
hydraulics and
changes
specifics
things.
of it, but you have to pump it. So
So currently where it is, because even
From Big
Big
Y to
Y
here,
is
it's
below the
like
town line, is it?
like 2 or 3 times.
Unless it's really deep, is there a, I don't know how that works, is it gravity fed down Coleman? Is it dug that deep, or is there pumping?
I don't know. They could have a ejector system that pushes it. There's different ways, and I'm not the professional. I've just seen some installations, but yeah. And generally, if you're downhill, you need to pump it back up wherever it's going. Doesn't do you any favors.
So I just wrote on 112 and 113, I just wrote status, a question mark, and these, like table 6.3
Right. 6.2, 6.3
and,
status.
yeah.
Yeah, it seems out of date, doesn't it?
yeah.
Much of
20,
it.
22 years.
20 years.
Costs, my goodness.
Yeah.
And were they, right, I put that too,
So
in
I-
discussion with officials of the city of Easthampton, where are those discussions now?
died, yeah.
Are they dead?
That's mentioned twice, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, to play devil's advocate, this was done in '97, addressing needs. Are they really needs? We haven't done it yet. In a lot of these areas, are they actual needs,
Right.
or are they needs or wishes?
Aspiration.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Or if there were real needs, they've probably gotten worse in the last 20 years. So you can look at it both ways, But there is mention too about there's a mention about a pumping station somewhere on Cook Road, isn't it?
Phase 1.
Oh, there we go, yeah.
I missed that.
But yeah, on page 113 there, that first paragraph, location of the system, again, trying to talk with Easthampton to tie it in from
Oh,
College
okay.
Highway, and a second line on
Road
County
pump
Road North
station.
to Cook Road Pump Station
Got it.
in Easthampton. Yeah. But again, recently, so, obviously there's, whatever that status and progress is
I
probably.
mean, that's,
nil.
we're just talking about wastewater, but there are also needs on the other side, like the water supply side of things,
Yeah,
and all the mechanics associated with
Right.
absolutely.
with that.
If you don't have enough water volume,
Yeah.
what's the good if
How are you going to do that? Yeah.
And again, my focus, I'm reading this, and this is mostly, it seems, this report is about looking up residences, but I sense we're talking more about what can we do commercially to do it.
Right.
Not so much homes.
I mean, I agree with what you're saying about wants and, is it really a need? I mean, if anything, I think we would just probably need sewage in the short term if we're thinking about commercial on the Westfield side of things. I don't know if we really need sewer through the middle of town. Is that-
Like, I don't need it in my house. I have a brand new septic system.
Well, I think it's thought that
I'm good.
it's needed.
Not to be selfish, but there are a lot of people that probably think that way.
Oh, absolutely. But to
Because
your
I don't
point,
need to pay another fee.
there's certain parts of town that have homes that are no longer compliant. Title V bumped them, and so they're stuck. Those people need it
Right.
if they want to sell. You lose
That's
the
when,
grandfather.
that's when it happens, when they sell. Because the house I live in, they had to put in a whole new system when we bought because of Title V, you know? It was a failed system. and
But-
Thank goodness they did, because we're the new owners.
The reality is, it just costs a lot more. You can put you see these
Mounds.
septic mounds, and they got a pump and all, and it's expensive. It's about twice as much or more to put one of those in. But so to your point, there's some people who need it, but is there enough of a
Right.
critical mass to say, oh my God, we got to run sewer through town? Seems like it's a nice to have. Ignorant people like me who think, oh, if you're going to put in a bike path, just shoot it down the railroad, educating me. When you start looking at it that way, it's not easy to do. Hasn't been done in over 20 years, so maybe it hasn't been done for a reason, because it's costly, challenging, technologically challenging, and the need
Does
isn't there.
the means justify the end?
Well, the need, and then, I think you're talking about is the voting majority there as well, right? Like the need, so you may have 40 houses that need this, and they may never be able to sell their home, but it does not mean the other 5,960 residents are going to vote for that because they don't
Doesn't
need that.
benefit
That's
them
right.
personally.
And it becomes another tax burden for something that they never even have the opportunity, or majority wouldn't have the opportunity to benefit in, because they're not going to run it to every home.
Unless it's easy to do, which was my assumption when I was looking at the Greenway. Wow, just run it down there. How hard is that?
Do we have a commercial development committee that looks at how to improve the viability of Southampton for commercial development? Or do we have anything like that could actively?
The question just came up, do we have anyone out there trying to advocate
Right.
to bring business into the community?
That's what that
Same
would
thing.
do.
No, we don't.
Or figure out a way to market the idea of the sewer running down Route 10 so that it gets approved.
Well, when we hired this current town administrator, the question came up to that person who's now hired at Gibson, is this something that we could eventually get to go out, and part of his job description might be to try to bring a business. The gentleman is so overwhelmed by everything else right now. He's not actively out there, I don't believe, looking for business, but he's supposed to be the go-to person if there might be somebody looking to build something in a town like Southampton. So I don't believe there's a committee of any sort or a board
No.
that's doing
The
it.
only-
We need to be
the only
a
thing
little
I
more
understand-
proactive.
The only thing I understand is that we're part of the Easthampton Chamber of Commerce, and that's it.
So that commercial or like industrial area that we've zoned out on the Westfield end of things, who owns that land though?
Where? Down on the Northfield
industrial
line.
zone.
A lot of that is owned by Jim LeBrie and his corporation. He showed me the other day all the stuff he owns.
And so,
right there.
at least they would be probably more willing to develop something, sell it and develop to a company, but it's not like we own that land. Like, oh yeah, come build, we have land for you to come
No,
build.
but I think
The
part
orchard.
of the role of a committee would be to
Sure.
work with landowners. That's what my hometown in California did.
Sure.
They put together a committee and started pulling in, because all we had was an Armour meat processing plant. That's about all we had. It's different now.
I wonder if there has been an analysis to see just actually how beneficial commercial development would be, because it's the same tax base as residential development.
Yeah,
Is
so
it
that's
going
also
to
something else.
actually, is the cost of putting in sewer and supplying water going to be,
Right. It's the assumption it's going to be a revenue generator, but it's an assumption.
Or is it just
I
a
would
cost
argue
for
that it's
20 years?
probably not a revenue generating.
Unless they change the tax structure.
Well, I think because of that,
Split
we
residential
actually have one of the lowest industrial commercial taxes anywhere in the valley.
Yeah.
So I
But it's-
would think that, it might not be good for us, so we might have to look at that and, reassess that, but.
Well, but yeah, before we go ad
But if you have the
seeking
conversation-
commercial development, it would be a good idea, I think, to know whether it's going to be of any benefit to the town.
That's a good point.
But once you talk about having the conversation of raising the tax rate, you'll discourage future development too, right? Or if you have the conversation of, well, we'll keep it the way it is, and we're gonna have you move in, and then in a year, we're gonna reassess the tax rates. You may encourage them to leave.
I was
Unless you're really established, that's tough.
I was looking at a tax list of some of the surrounding areas, and we're significantly lower
Yeah.
Commercial.
than surrounding
So
towns.
we could
But we have no
limit a little
infrastructure.
bit
We
and
would still be the
lower.
lowest.
Yeah. But we have, the infrastructure we have is limited,
Right.
and
You can't
the
charge more.
commercial businesses we have are limited, so it's not, it's difficult.
And that's one of the things, you have to look at it, okay, maybe we raise it a couple percent, let's look at, what size of a business might come in, if we did put in the infrastructure to do public water, sewer, what the needs might be.
Well, how much it would have to be raised
Right,
to
or
make
the-
the cost of the infrastructure worth.
Break even.
Yeah.
See, we couldn't give the tax breaks Amazon needs to relocate.
No. And they probably couldn't build on half the town anyway.
Should there be a follow-up on this section? Because it's such an important, is there anything we should be looking
I
at?
wonder if
Come
we should
supply 2,000
invite,
Jefferson.
well, tomorrow night should be, this presentation, hopefully will give some information. And then maybe we should think about inviting someone from zoning, someone from water, and have a whole discussion together. Just to enlighten us and to maybe connect the dots there and
There's a lot of
start.
stuff we don't know.
Minimally, to
Stimulating
orient them
some
to the master
conversation,
plan.
yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
We'll bring brownies and glasses of water. Yeah, sure. I think that would be a great follow-up, at least, to get this going and then figure out what of the strategies and goals at the very end can be,
Yeah.
or have already been, perhaps.
Because I do agree, we could keep, we've identified like the rural integrity of the town, but, if we have this commercial area on the edge of town, more towards Westfield, and it could be beneficial under some analysis. Maybe it's not the worst thing in the world, but there should be some type of committee or group that's looking at, is that really viable? Is it something
Can
that
we be
would help?
thinking about that at some April or May meeting, yeah?
Maybe that's a recommendation comes out of this group. How do we put in a structure that's going to drive this?
It's been talked about long enough.
Yeah.
Mike, when do you next make a report to
I
the
was,
select board?
I was hoping to, my goal was to get through the chapters and kind of give our review, like sort of the goals and, the goals, kind of a once-over review, and then to do another update. And just try to provide more insight into where we are, what we found, maybe address some critical items in there, and just provide some information and maybe a little more direction. This is where we are. At that point, we'll probably revisit the, we talked about kind of the realignment or review of priorities, and maybe that becomes a conversation point with them of, this is what we found, this is where we are today. Do you have an area you want us to concentrate in? And then frame that around the, reaching out to the citizens, the residents that we talked about, getting a little more input from them as well. So that was kind of my goal, get through this with a once-over, and then go back to them. So whenever we finish.
I didn't know about what they called you.
We pretty much have a schedule that I can't remember the frequency. Some have to come every quarter, some come twice a year, some of the committees.
Yeah.
I'd have to go back and look at the chart to see.
I haven't received my invite yet, so I'm not
Yeah.
sure.
Planned it.
Yes, you're right. Polite command.
But I think keeping it in front of people, to let them know that it's going on, when we need to do something, it wouldn't be like just, dumping something on them that up to now they didn't expect.
Right. So my hope would be the next time I go before them to have our goal review, the red, yellow, green report, just pretty well finalized of where we are so that they have something to review and look at. When I went the first time, I'm speaking to them about a 333-page document. To be honest with ourselves, I didn't even read it at that point, neither did they. So, I think hopefully with something a little more truncated, smaller, easier for them to digest, we could have a little more of a directional conversation. That's the hope. And I am taking notes on here, things that come up. Is there a committee that can push for development, including sewer? So not necessarily the most grammar-friendly notes, but I'm taking notes. And then I generally go back and kind of categorize them, put them into a piece. So I take notes on every chapter so that when we go through the review, I can at least look at the notes I took and say this was a hot topic. We should put a star or highlight this type of things. Moving on, telecommunications, broadband. Be wired or be fired?
I've never heard that saying.
Me neither.
Did anyone?
I'm insulted by the millennial generation designation in there.
marks?
Yeah, I was kind of like, I found out the other day I am a millennial. I vehemently denied it with a kid we work with. I said, there's no way I'm part of your generation.
Yeah.
And he showed me and he's like, no, you are. And I'm like, this is horrible.
You're the upper end.
Yeah, by like a year, but it's still, you're
How old are you?
34.
I'm the last
35
year of the baby
included.
boomers. The very last year.
I'm denying that. Baby boomer. I
I'm
just
not
no
saying
way.
where I am.
Because when I remember being in grade school when they talked about baby boomers, and it wasn't me. All of a sudden they kept changing the definition. Baby boomer, it's impossible.
Did anyone
Just-
attend or see the select board meeting on, we had a presentation from a consulting firm that's been working in Westfield to help cities and towns create their own fiber optics.
Is it Joe Parda?
I don't remember his name. Okay. But anyway, that instead of depending upon the cable, the places like Charter and Comcast
something
who
about
aren't meeting the needs, especially of rural communities, apparently they're able to do it when they're like 20 houses per mile as opposed to the 30 houses that the cable companies. We would set up basically our own business in town and provide these services. It would essentially be a competitor of Comcast or Charter, Spectrum, whatever they call themselves these days. But that would be great. I mean, there's still some outlying areas where people don't have internet access. They have, the DSL, and fiber optics would be.
Would that be a revenue generating?
I believe so.
No, that's what.
So
Or I would just say, even if it were break even, it would provide benefit.
But I wondered if that could be looked at as a potential revenue.
Yeah, it would be something the town would utilize itself to run the municipality, and then opening up to residential customers, and maybe even how it came in. It was J&E is building, an addition, and they just don't have enough bandwidth there And so, because of its proximity to Westfield is how they started talking to this company, brought him in to see if that would be something our town. And it's interesting that other towns are doing it. I'm trying to think of who, I think it's Northampton's considering it. I
So-
mean, we're kind
that
of
why
always in the
Westfield has
back,
its own
and if
public
we
Wi-Fi?
start to move
Yeah.
ahead a little bit and get ourselves into the next kind of generation of infrastructure.
So,
I mean, we're
Montgomery's just
still
gone with
waiting for
Comcast.
the Greenway.
yeah, Worthington did as well. So,
They helped all the
And-
rural towns, like Chesterfield and all of that. They've
Yeah.
already put that together.
So full disclosure, I work directly with Westfield Gas and Electric for the third-party build-out in all the rural towns, all of the last mile towns. So the towns that are not served, so we are considered a served town. Towns that are not served are given grant funding by the government to do third-party build-out for fiber, high-speed internet. I'm not sure we would be considered for grant. I don't know all the specifics, but in general, it's, if you don't have internet in your town, the governor has made it a charge to make sure you have internet at your door, especially in all the hill towns, because some of the children can't do homework at home. They have to go to school or go to the library. So with this, so Easthampton is doing this. Westfield Gas and Electric operates as you could call it a developer. So they will come into the town, they manage the running of the new fiber, the attachment to the existing utility poles, they build communication huts. So they kind of manage that, and they help the town set up what's called its own municipal light plant. The municipal light plant allows a town to operate as a municipal utility company. You could buy all of your streetlights. You could buy the power at the top of the poles. You could buy all of those.
Really?
It'd be an exorbitant amount of money to buy all that, but you could as a municipal light plant. So they set up this MLP, which allows you to operate these fiber networks in your town. Leverett is a great example. They did it 6 years ago. Theirs is really well. They did a really good job, but once again, they were not served. They received a lot of funding. So process-wise, just so everyone knows, it's not just as easy as hanging another wire on a utility pole. So we have clearance standards for all wires that are attached there. Generally speaking, rural communities have to change out one out of every 10 poles because the clearances aren't there to allow a new attachee to attach. In which we've been working with Westfield on a lot of those rural communities, and it's a great option. I'd love to not pay what I pay for cable and internet in my house, but you do pay for the construction. You do pay for the cost, the replacement, the install. I mean, Easthampton has an estimate for $10 million for theirs to do their build out. Now, much more robust, lot more demand, a lot more streets, but we may have as many, we'll probably have less miles, but probably not by much if you think about where you have to go, because you're not going to just build it in the center of town, because once again, if it's taxpayer funded,
Square miles.
I want it at my
Want to
house.
benefit everyone, right?
So it is a great option if it saves you money. If it saves you $20 a month for the next 20 years
Per household.
per household, is it worth an extra?
That's how you could
So
sell it as a
what were the
bond.
next steps
Right.
at the end of that presentation? Where
I think we have to go back and there would be some cost associated with, I think, feasibility
Yep.
to see exactly what Mike's talking about, the practicality, the cost associated with it, whether or not funding is available. He made it sound like funding could be available to us.
Maybe it is, but being a served community,
No,
all the
I
towns
see
we're
what you're
doing this
saying.
in now, they don't have it at
anything.
all.
Right.
Do you think the definition of
priority,
served might change over time as some of the low-hanging fruit gets taken care of in the hill towns, and then now you're looking at a place that only is 50% served. Might that
I mean,
change or?
it may be, but I mean, I don't know how many people in a town don't have direct access to
This says,
high-speed internet.
well, this is old, but it defines served, a town is served if at least half of the households
Right.
have broadband
Right.
access.
But we don't know how many people in Southampton, how many
Right, are we
households are served.
51% or 90%?
Right.
And I don't know that number. So you do the feasibility study, you would set up your municipal light plan. I don't know the process of that. That'd be something Westfield Gas and Electric would
Where
help
would
you with.
that go? How big is that?
How,
This plan?
it's an entity. It's honestly very similar, from what I've seen, to an enterprise fund, to where you balance it every year.
Would be interesting.
Some towns actually give the profits to their internet service provider. My assumption is that's to help keep the rates low for the ratepayers.
I say they give it back to the townspeople, essentially.
Right, so they give it to the supplier so that the supplier doesn't boost the rate. With all things, there's maintenance costs. Right, a pole's gonna get hit, you're going to have to hang your wire back up because telephone's not gonna do it, we're not going to do it. Service calls, those types of things.
If you build this municipal light plant, can you sell to other communities or to commercial properties?
So yeah, you become Charter or Comcast.
Okay, places.
Yeah. We would be a competitor of.
So you would set up your own plan, you could do what they did with the phone, internet, cable. I mean, you can offer different plan options.
And I think this is what cable companies are worried about. In terms of,
I mean, we're in a prime location, if you think about it, because Westfield has it, they're working with Easthampton now on their feasibility study, we're right in the middle.
Connect.
It is a nice opportunity. It is a business, it is a small little business niche that Westfield has moved in on, and they're working in that niche. Nobody does that.
Who
for
is
these
it,
towns.
Westfield Gas and Electric, that are
Yeah.
doing it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So they're doing it for all the Hilltown communities. There was a need and they filled it, and it's working out well for them, in terms of they're helping out all the towns, they're keeping everyone busy. It's a lot of work. I mean, my department alone has looked at close to 20,000 utility poles for attachment, or 15,000 utility poles for attachment in Western Massachusetts in the last year and a half, through outside resources helping. Like, it's a lot of work. That's Westfield's doing that. Some towns are doing it on their own, but it's nice to have a competitive option.
At what point does our contract with Charter expire?
It's renewed every, is it 3 or 5?
something.
I want to say,
Number. I think we just renewed it.
I think you did.
I think it was just renewed in the fall.
So I think it's 3-year, because you were looking at it when I first joined the finance committee.
Yeah.
I think it was a topic of discussion then.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember that, but yes, it's.
And I don't know if
I would love to see a competitor of Charter. I really would. I think we'd give people more options, hopefully would drive down the cost, because I know we pay, it's astronomical,
Yeah.
$240 a month.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Would be
Yes.
200.
What do you do?
Cable TV and internet, it's like 2 hours.
Phone, I mean,
you have, like, every channel?
No. The phone is like, $25. That's the least
Right.
expensive. The
And if you lose
landline,
the
it's
phone, then
everything
the other
else.
things go up.
Yes,
Like, we've looked
absolutely.
at it 12 ways to Sunday.
Right,
and
you
it's-
think, I don't need a landline, I'm gonna drop it. But then you lost the bundle and.
But it's
We just have
Reach out
internet
to
this
our other
way.
stuff.
That's-
Doesn't make
yeah.
any difference.
We are getting junk calls.
So,
We do still get junk calls.
yeah, and I'm not, people I talk to, pretty much their bills are around that much.
Mine's 110, and I'm like having a hard time paying it. I called the other day to try to reduce it, and they said, you can't, because it'll just go up. And I'm like, this makes no sense.
I haven't called in a while, but in the occasions that I have called, I've been able to kind of like rebundle things, because I basically watch like 3 channels.
Right.
News,
Get an
And
antenna.
rerun channels.
Yeah, we don't
Where
even
you
have that
were,
anymore. We
worked
have an
great for
antenna.
me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Is
we
that
don't
what you
have
just
it.
said, Jim?
I
I
just
tried.
gotta start
I was on the,
get that signal.
I attached a direct TV antenna on the
Fire
roof
stick.
in Randall Lion House. I still couldn't get service.
But you get live on streaming? I could get MSNBC?
You can.
If I don't get to watch Rachel, I'm very unhappy.
Well, yes,
Speaking of which, I do watch them.
So,
He's gonna run away with
the
it.
one thing I would say with the telecommunication is if, I mean, it may be something worth piggybacking with Easthampton, seeing if there's an economy of scales with that as well, like if,
Right, or Westfield.
right, and if Westfield's the administrator and they're working with Easthampton, if they're working with us, it just makes everything.
Why did I think that they were going to come to talk to the town, Westfield? Where did I hear this?
the two guys came, not the last meeting before, to describe
To
what
the
was
select
going
board?
on. Pardon?
To the select board?
Yes.
Was it from Westfield, Gas and Electric?
I thought they were from a consulting company that worked with
Maybe so.
Westfield. They put
I
this
heard something
infrastructure
about
in,
this, yeah.
and they talked to us about it. And I think, I think it's something that we should explore.
Absolutely.
We need to be, to me, just a little more forward-thinking about things, what the future's going to hold.
I think that's
To get
another-
ourselves positioned.
I think that's another thing, that needs to be looked at. Like, obviously it's going to have a lot of upfront costs, but, in the long run, is it?
Well, especially to Mike's point, if there's economies of scale while neighboring towns are doing this.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's like, had we done the bike path when everybody else was doing the bike path, it would have been a lot less expensive than it is now. Now, we're like in the middle of,
Right.
Like,
in the-
things like this that we should jump on.
yes,
But
yes.
there were loud people that shot it down, right? At the town meeting when it came before the bike path. I'm
Yep.
talking about.
So,
Let's see.
it is 8:30. Do we want to continue, try to do another section of this?
No.
I have to get printer ink home to my son so he can print his essay.
But you need to mention what we asked you to do for the presentation. That's a different topic. And so maybe we could pick up and review this,
Yeah.
the chapters again. And
Good with that. So I have been voluntold to attend an open space recreation ad hoc committee meeting.
Aw, lucky you.
No, actually, no, you've been asked to speak.
Yes.
That's different than attending. You can come to the meetings.
Wednesday, April 10th, I've been asked to speak at it's an open space and recreation ad hoc committee meeting. Now, this is,
It's a
where's the, I'm not good at,
I see Cindy's name.
This is a forum. We
Yes.
talked about the fact that the town got the grant to do this, to focus on, very specifically on landowners, to let them know of their options, whether it be tax or whether it be just conservation. And there's 2 evening forums that have been planned. The first is April 10th, the next is April 30th. I think you're all going to get an invitation to this, or did you already?
I got it in the mail.
The postcard,
Oh,
yes.
the postcard is stay the
The
day.
postcard was very, unfortunately, it didn't say what it was really.
I know.
That
It is meant to be a save the date thing. I
Yeah.
hope it didn't look like a church event, but.
Kind of did.
Uh-oh,
Yeah.
don't tell my friend Diana Fetterman. But, and then we're working on the brochure right now. So there's 2, and we've asked Mike to represent the master plan, just to talk about the things related, especially in chapter 4, it can be really concise, just to talk about how these things are in the master plan, and that will hopefully educate this population that is coming. And then there's a third event, which is actually a Saturday event, May 11th. Unfortunately, it's another thing happening that day as well. But, and that's going to be a hike and a picnic. And the hike location is still under discussion right now, and the picnic, we've held Kona Park for that. So if you can make it, that's good. I mean, even if you're not landowners, you're important people to come and hear some of these speakers, and also contribute to the conversation. So the first one's going to include an attorney speaking about Chapter 61, and somebody talking about, I've lost track about which one is which. I think APR is on the first one, agricultural protection, that might be on the second one. Plus, we have landowners coming, and we have somebody from our Conservation Commission coming, Charlotte, how do you say her name, Axum, from the Conservation Commission. She's quite knowledgeable. The second one is going to include attorneys talking about conservation restrictions and also developing trusts as part of their estate planning, et cetera. So it should be pretty dynamic and interesting. It'll include a meal, and we have identified the church as the place. And then the third one is a hiker, and we have a naturalist speaking at that one. So it's really exciting.
So I've been asked to speak about chapter 4, and I think open space and natural resources, it's a broad topic too, especially when you consider the master plan, because every chapter we go into sort of hits on it, right? We just
Right.
talked about water and water protection. So it does, so the goal is to talk about chapter 4 and then just sort of expand it as in,
Yeah.
this is a big part of the master plan. It touches each chapter. There's a lot of importance at all levels, and, just kind of expand on it.
It's not,
So-
you shouldn't call it chapter 4. It's
Right.
just the fact that this whole thing is about open space and natural resources and conservation and having
Everyone
landowners
isn't
know
going
their
to read
options.
the master plan by then?
And it doesn't mean no development.
Right.
It does mean having landowners be informed about options, and that's really what it's about.
So,
Yeah, so that each time property becomes available, we don't go through
Right.
Well,
educating
not
the
everything's-
property owner and going,
Correct, yeah, hopefully.
it's like starting it over. It's like Groundhog Day every time it happens.
so with that, if you want to attend, especially the day I'm
Especially
there,
hear you, yes.
please do. Happy to tag someone in, and I can take a seat during the presentation. But
Okay.
we'll be doing that. So.
Good.
All right. With that,
Can I just ask,
Yes.
should we be, this is what I did with the Council on Aging. I gave them a copy of the content that covers them specifically in the master plan. And I teased out the goals in which they were mentioned and tried to get an update from them if any of these things have occurred, or what else would they like to see. Should we, while we're doing this review, should we also be doing that so that we're kind of doing two things at the same time? We're going out and getting input while we're reviewing and bringing that information back to this group. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, we're just going to end up doing that later.
We're going to end up doing it
Same
after
time.
we do this,
Right.
so it might save a little bit of time.
If all the committees can, start thinking about what their priorities are and
Right, right. Because, virtually every goal affects everybody in the town. Specifically, there are those committees that are assigned the responsibility, but there's just, it's just a lot. I'm trying to figure out, we could be doing this for the next years. By the time we get done, it'll be time to update it again.
Yeah, I think in our defense, and I don't mean to lump you in this, but, we were given a task without direction, right? So we're and I agree with you, we probably should be more efficient with the chapter and the goal, but you're learning the chapter.
No, I agree
right?
with you. We all came into this really not knowing anything. And the reason
Right.
we're going through it the way we're going through it is so we can educate ourselves and one another and kind of come to some common understanding before we decide what we're going to do. We have to know.
I think this is a good document, but, the vast majority of the town people, they haven't read this. They haven't read this cover to cover.
They don't.
One thing and maybe I'm wrong in thinking this, but sometimes when we go through these chapters, I feel like that the information and the things we talk about are more important than the goals. Because I feel like you're talking about the hot topic items almost separate from the goals, and some coincide with the goals, but some of these were created almost 10 years ago. We
And
haven't
they're
done
dated.
we haven't done anything with them.
And some of them you don't need to do at this point.
Right.
Well, I always, when you're doing a large plan like this, there's always pressure to develop goals, to have sometimes a certain number of goals per item, and so I feel like some of the goals were a bit of a reach. Is that
Yeah.
really a goal? Is that really appropriate?
That was
Do you know
very
what I mean?
evident during the meetings,
Okay.
that, everybody was just throwing out strategies and goals.
Right, so they may not, they're just
And
not
they weren't
relevant
really
necessarily.
edited,
Right.
everything was added to the list.
To the point you made earlier and just hinted at again, if it hasn't happened in so many years, then is it really? So I agree with you, Mike, in the sense that this discussion to me, what comes out as themes, we've all read it, mark it up, and then what comes out as a theme is more important than a goal that was made 10,
Right.
15 years ago. What's the sense in the room from this diverse?
Well, the goal to me is really what people perceive as the need at the time, what they envisioned for themselves that they would like to see the town become. Yeah, but I agree, it isn't just about that. It's
I mean, I think there are a lot of things that we've gone over and will go over that, maybe haven't been done in the past 10 years, and where we're at now, it's okay where it is. Maybe there are a couple of things, smaller things we'll work
can
on. but
remain
As a
aspirational.
whole thing, it's
Right.
good where we're at, we're all right.
We could talk about like permitting and development strategies, right? So that could be a very broad category.
Yes.
But that covers where you build your building, how you build your building, can you build your building? Do you have the resources? So I think categorizing some of those sort of larger think bubbles are important, because we're gonna look at this goal and be like, I don't even know, why is this in here, right? Or how do we start this? So maybe next week we'll start, and I will do a better job of sort of driving towards some of the goals, so we kind of have a little more information.
Now, is this the updated checklist, or the?
This is the last one, yes, so this is what I had sent Margaret.
So are we going to need to print this out to talk about it, or how are we going to discuss this?
Yeah, we will. I will do copies for the next time, how about that?
Might be easier just to.
That'd be great.
Is that tough to read?
Well,
So when I import this into numbers, which is what I have, it does something really weird, so I have to get Excel anyway. I'm gonna have to bite the bullet and get it anyway.
Okay.
Because Word documents I'm getting, they're just like, everything's getting weird, so.
Okay. Well, for next meeting, I'll give this kind of a little once-over, just double check some things, take out some of my comments, because some aren't the best. And then I'll print copies for everyone, so we can kind of go through and we can kind of do a once-over and while we're in the chapters, and
That sounds good.
we'll go from there. Any other imperative new
Yeah,
business?
next meeting.
I was just checking for new business.
Two weeks from today, the 25th.
oh my, oh wow,
Passing around baby
he's
pictures.
really grown.
Yeah, sorry.
Brings a smile to your face,
Yes.
Mike.
He
Because I
does.
couldn't do the next week because of school committee, so it would have to be the 25th.
25th? I'm good with the 25th.
Like Good Brothers.
Yep.
That's 3:25, 7 PM
7
here.
PM, yep, we'll continue 6.
Continue 6, and
7 is pretty short. You want to do 7 too?
at least read 7 in
Yeah.
case.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. I'll put it on the agenda
Very
in
short.
case.
Yeah.
Read 7, and then you'll book this room, and you'll also give a notice in advance.
I will.
So the 25th, eh?
25th of March, correct.
Okay,
Okay.
do you need a motion to,
Is there a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
I second it.
Bye.
Yeah.
You.
Do you have words of wisdom for me?
I don't know if I do. We have a Mac at home, and so
Do you have any problems?
I was just gonna say,
Sometimes I do. Like,
You know, I've never-
really dense
codes change, I mean, are
documents
they
get
changing to be
wacky.
more
yeah,
environmentally
what I
friendly
haven't
and
done is what you're
responsible?
doing is starting with
Yes.
the Microsoft product,
Sure.
bring it in. What I usually do is
You
I'm
use,
starting
you kill
with
more
numbers
trees
or-
to build more
Actually,
efficient houses.
much more often with pages.
Pages.
No, I'm talking about
And then when I
like
want
water
to
kind
share
of
it with others
reuse
who don't have a Mac, I'll
systems,
do
Not
it.
things like that.
You
Not
do an
to that
export
level,
to
but they
Word
do
and it's
require
fine.
That is
now,
fine, yeah.
But I,
or they
But
will
trying
be
to open up
requiring,
a
you frame
sometime,
your roof in a
always
way
trying
that you
to
can
open
have
up
a
there's
certain
lot
number of solar
formatting or
panels.
something.
that would be good.
Open up the numbers.
You know, I mean, they
Excel.
require low E,
Sometimes
high
it's
efficient glass,
Not good.
oh, I see.
Our
So
town.
higher
are you-
insulation. Yeah, everyone, every town in Massachusetts.
I used to have
has
Excel
Okay.
and then we upgraded my
All
system
right.
and my old
I mean,
version
that
of
makes me feel
Excel
better.
didn't work with
Because
my
again,
operating
I don't
system.
want
And
to
so I need
repeating the
to
mistakes of the
purchase
past,
the
especially if the
purchase it.
technology's there now.
So you have existing Excel sheets you want to manipulate on,
Well, people send me stuff.
Oh, I
Me
see.
for work too, so I just
okay.
need to bite the bullet.
I've always liked,
it's difficult.
I've always liked Macs versus Windows, and so I just got Microsoft Office.
Those are like
That's what we had.
saving the side showing the sleep
The
on.
version I had didn't work with my new operating
That's
system.
a cat.
Just curious, does that work for you?
Now, where's the
Microsoft.
I rarely use Pages and Word.
He looks more and more like you.
The only reason I'll use those is maybe from what's up there.
I don't think
I
so.
mean, because
But everybody wants it back in a Microsoft format, unfortunately.
There's a lot of
there's still so many people that use Microsoft.
I haven't looked at it.
I like Mac computers way more than
Could deliver your ink to my son.
Same, mostly because I got tired of
He
changing
actually,
but I do
viruses and
like,
things like that.
so
but I do like
his first like true word call out
I do
is
like
kitty
salad.
salad.
Be
Because
fabulous.
of the cats. He goes, I don't know, every time he sees that from work, like he knows dog, he knows
Maybe pages, maybe numbers have
cat is probably only 100% memory of complex functionality. So I'm used to Microsoft products at work.
I
And I find you want to do stuff outside of work, your kids walking, and a lot of people I know don't have a Mac.
Definitely.
So if I send them a
Actually,
numbers
party at,
document,
Having been here
Can't
forever,
open.
yes, but I
Just
also.
wish no, these days
I'm
could have
gone
written.
because I'm.
I
You
grew
got
up
red like little spaces.
then I had Windows in college.
Yeah, across the hall from them.
But
It's like a community room, but you can rent it, it comes with tables and chairs and traffic.
Even when I had Macs when
really.
I was younger.
You know, we invited people, so we had some
And
kids there running around with numbers and making that space to.
I'm sure they probably are more or less the same, but I feel like
What Easthampton has done.
whether it's I don't have that just good feeling with it, or it just it seems like the
He
interface
just,
is
the
not
other day, too much to learn it the right shape, like doesn't right thing for that.
Can I do?
That's great.
Turn on color when something's a certain.
Brand new.
I know all the commands in Word and Excel.
It's too much work
It's actually
just to relearn.
she's a year in August.
And they make Microsoft Office for Mac.
The master,
And so I'm
Why not?
It's because
You know why they do that? Because there's less people like you
they tell her
and
what
me.
it is.
I don't want you to hear all
Show me, you know, there's
Yeah.
no exchange. I mean,
Like,
not-
I don't know if I know anybody that uses Pages.
So Amanda has two nieces that
So
are,
when you create
that are not as
an Excel
far as they
spreadsheet
could be
using
because the parents make
Microsoft
that.
Excel
Parents speak
format,
for them, the parents make their.
now you want to send it to somebody or share it with somebody.
I have no, like,
Microsoft OS.
she speaks to Ethan sometimes, like, five
File,
and she gives him options.
export as Excel,
She
or
did
does
it
it
two
go
things the other day, which one you want, he chose what he wanted, so.
That's it. I mean, that's how you have to.
No one's ever said.
If you
Yeah.
just hand it over.
I haven't done that much sharing from
no
home,
need to-
but
that's
if I
why-
were
then
to someday,
you don't know what you're doing.
Microsoft Office for Mac.
So we use,
It's just,
we started selling as a suite,
Word by Excel, Word, stuff like that for Mac.
you can install it as a suite.
Yeah.
Like I went on because I originally got
He doesn't, it's
we
not
got a new
as
MacBook
consistent,
Pro.
but it will be.
This is the
We're
whole
gonna get there. By the time
We got a MacBook Pro.
he knows when he's really frustrated, when he's starting, he knows he can go like this or like this.
She was used to Windows.
We don't, we're done.
But I love Macs, so we got a Mac.
Because he's usually pulling it at the end, trying to run it off, and
It's not as much
all
fun.
done. And he gets so mad that he
She
finally
still
does
says, I don't know,
it.
I'm still not used to this, but you know, you can just go online and download
2 days. Working for the power company doesn't help.
Doesn't help.
you know.
And the
That's
citizen.
cool.
We were at
So
16 hours.
they
There were
back.
people at 3 is, actually.
Yeah.
I went to last year's citizen.
Yeah, because I mean, even Mac, like, what's it called? Keynote, which is the same as.
It was pretty bad. They had 70.
Yeah,
You know, a lot of people.
3 mile per
I
hour winds.
don't know,
on
this is not
top.
as good as power.
So what happens if
I mean, it just came, wind
Or
has
maybe
maybe
it's
it's got a basic version that accelerates up and down, and it will sell. Bad winds are
Say,
bad.
we have no
Hopefully,
people
basic
that
version,
really
just
wanna run.
number of
You want the good version, you gotta pay for it.
This is interesting, you know, about the fiber optic thing, because I would be, we need to find a way to,
I mean, I like the idea. I would love the idea. Yeah, I If you're gonna tell me my tax rate will go up by $20 for 5 years, and then it goes down by $20, and then I can save the $20,
it
sure.
might be worth the investment, you know. Because if you look at it,
The third party.
because the longer we go, the further it gets. And I just like, you know,
I mean, I think you look back at when, you know, we were
Small
at
town.
history channel, it's like, oh yeah, everybody else was developing and factories and we said, no thanks on all that. And now we're like, oh,
There is a concept in Southampton.
sorry.
maybe we should jump ahead of some things if we can.
Tabs with what
So the big thing with seniors was actually housing.
change and
Tell me more.
Did Rainey go to the meeting? To one of your housing meetings?
No,
No, maybe she talked to someone, because she's on me.
we haven't met in quite some time, so we need to get together.
Okay.
I asked Jennifer.
Because this whole thing about being, you know, people being priced out, no affordable housing, not just for people moving into the town, but for people who want to stay in the town. When we're talking about development, kind of smaller units for helping people age in place. And
They were very much in tune with that, and because that was an assumption of mine,
Yeah.
but they were identifying that. Yeah. See, if we had the right zoning, you know, that, I just think of that little development off of Pomeroy by the school there. Single level, it would have been ideal
If
if
we
we
get
could have.
transportation through there, I mean, there could be a lot of really good.
Well, even if they're somewhat rural, right around the corner, Dunkin' Donuts,
Well, that's it.
you know, Humvees if you need something quick, you know.
And now that they're building an urgent care, you know that they're opening one. Down the big line.
Yeah.
And you have the rehab place, which a lot of people use, you know, the physical rehab. We got a few doctor's offices, we got a dentist.
Yeah.
I mean,
After all these
there's a lot of potential without having to have this sprawling
Right.
thing. It's just,
So that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna make lots of dinner and take them to dinner. We'll kind of see, I think, Route 15, which goes into Stowe from Morgan's Kingdom. So if you're at Eastwood Falls, so.
Sure, what's off now?
St. Albans, here's New Hampshire.
I hope it is. The video may be off, the screen may be off,
I happen
but
to
it
feel
may still be recorded.
both of my parents grew up here.
Yeah.
That was what he used.
Yeah.
Some changes.